So last time we talked about the applications and kind of how we use them or how I use them on a day-to-day basis. Now, I thought we could talk about the hardware and what you need if you were to try to do the same thing yourself. So, just to give a bit of a historical context to all this, I started off I started off with my home lab when I upgraded my workstation. So, a few years back, we just upgraded my workstation. I found a better deal on like a newer one. So, I just had like this big machine with quite a bit of power uh, lying around. So, I had to do something with it. So I bought another one, and that composed my first cluster. Right, I basically built this as a kind of a playground just to tinker with stuff, and I still have it running. Right, I still have my lab up and running, and I'm kind of experimenting with some other stuff there. But that kind of started everything, and I think that was about 2.5 years ago or something like that. Now, I was having a bit of an issue with these, and the issue was with like the heft of it all, right? Like it's pretty big cluster, right? I think the workstation is like an HP Z440, which is a pretty big like box, pretty heavy. The other node in the cluster is an HP Elite, which is like a small form factor machine, but still pretty big. So I really wanted these like ultra small form factor machines for this. And this is primarily because I kind of rent. So these machines just kind of, are like pretty small, so you can just kind of take them, check them in the backpack and move. And I think that's kind of an important thing when you rent, right? You never know what's going to happen. If you want to move, your personal data should be kind of easily moved with you. You shouldn't have to, struggle to get everything from one place to the other. So that's when I kind of started researching these. I managed to buy like a big box of 11 of these, and I just migrated my personal data away from the lab. Is currently located on these machines over here, and yeah, it's pretty nice because I can just kind of take them if I want to, and this kind of a compact footprint. It's okay in a small apartment as well. So let's talk about the hardware, right? And what you kind of need in order to get things running. And the big thing you will need first is a couple of these small form factor machines. So as I said, this is gonna be focused on your personal data. I call this the atHomeHub. Right, kind of like the home hub idea, just because it becomes like a hub of your application. It's not really a lab, right? Whatever we put on these machines is not something that we experiment with or tinker with. We actually use it, right? The applications that are hosted on these are actually used, and we're actually storing real life data. So it's like a production environment of sorts. So two machines, we want to have replication between them, right? We don't want to have just one and for that to fail and then all the data to be lost. So that's why we need two. These are pretty cheap. These are 6th gen i5s, which is it's fine to get started with. I posted this in my GitHub repo as well. I do have issues with CPU load, so you can see it's kind of spiking over the total amount of CPU cores, and that's not necessarily an issue. Right, the idea with CPU load is that when your processes need to process, they need time on the CPU, right? So let's say image, right, needs to process a picture, then the image process is going to request time on the CPU in order to do said processing. And when the load is over the total amount of available CPU threads or cores, the process is going to need to wait until there is space available to do the processing that it needs to do, right, to process. So 4 CPU threads is a bit low, right? I also have this screenshot that I attached here. We can see that the load does spike quite often over the total amount of available cores. And it depends also on how much you use them, or if the cluster is idle and there's no use, you still have like background tasks and whatever, but nobody cares. But if you actually use the applications and you kind of do some edits in outline, upload some pictures and image, maybe take some notes on Blinko as well, then all these processes need time to do their processing, right? And that's going to be, kind of sluggish, right? Like the system is going to become a bit slow as everybody's waiting after everybody to do their thing. I'm not saying that it's bad, right? Like I've honestly been kind of okay with the 6th Gen i5, right? Like it's been running for quite a bit, and it's kind of been okay. But I did recently buy some new machines. So I got a pair of these Dell Optiplex 7080 machines. And these are newer. These have like a 10th gen i5, and this has 6 cores and 12 available threads. And I could have continued running these, and I could have just added more nodes, right? Like as you can see, I have 3 of them, and I did start with only 2. I added one more in panic, actually. We were about to go to Portugal, and the day of the flight, I was like, okay, if this fails, I'm not gonna be able to, I don't want to connect remotely to it and whatever. And I knew I was about to upload a lot of pictures, and the image machine learning thing uses a lot of CPU. So I was like, okay, I'm adding another node, I'm putting it there, and I'm just gonna have the image running on it, so it can, hold for my vacation. It was fine, and I think it would have been fine without it as well, but still. These sort of CPU load spikes kind of, panicked me a bit, and I just wanted to be sure. But I don't want to run 3 nodes, right? The energy consumption is also kind of a thing when you're building this. So that's why I've decided to upgrade and buy these 10th gen machines. And I see it more as an investment into this, right? Like I like the applications that I'm running on them. I actually use them. So I am adding this additional CPU power just so I can use them over the foreseeable future. If you can score yourself some 8th Gen, I think those are a pretty good in between, just because those have 6 cores with 6 threads. So you get a couple extra and and a bit more of a performance CPU, because you kind of can fix CPU load with like a higher frequency CPU, for example, just because the total time that the process will need to process lowers, just because the CPU is faster, so it can finish its processing quicker, and then other processes can come and utilize the space that was freed up, and then you can resolve load like that. But usually it's just easier to have more cores and just not worry about it. These are pretty low power machines, so they won't like turbo forever, right? The base frequencies are pretty low and all that. And I think that's about it to say on these. There are some weird use cases. So I think I mentioned this as well when I was talking about this setup. So yes. Now, we'll talk about storage in a bit, but the machines themselves need to support the storage devices that you'll be using. I went with an M.2 SSD for system storage and a SATA SSD for personal storage. We'll talk about those in a minute. But basically the machine itself needs to support these 2 slots, or have support for two storage devices, so that could be two M.2 slots or an M.2 and a SATA SSD. At the beginning, I wanted to be kind of space efficient with these, so I wanted to convert the Wi-Fi slot into an M.2 slot, I guess, so I can fit my OS storage there. So I did get some adapters off of AliExpress that I've kind of cut down, and they're in this socket over here, basically. Right, there's just like an adapter so I can fit the M.2 SSD in it. But some machines don't support booting off of this. So for example, this, I think that's like an M720Q or something from Lenovo, sorry, does not support this. I made it boot off of it through randomness, like I just basically disabled, enabled, disabled again settings in the BIOS under the boot options, and it eventually worked. No idea why, no idea how, it just worked. And when I researched this issue, I found that there are some other Lenovo machines that do the same. And I think that's primarily because you could opt those out with two M.2 slots. So I think maybe Lenovo thought that people might be able to do this hack. So to stop them, they kind of disabled the option to boot from it. So that's kind of annoying, right? But honestly, I think it was all for nothing, right? Like I basically wanted to do this just to leave the M.2 slot available, right, open, in case I wanted to do some expansion later on. And I don't think I want to do any expansion later on. Like if I were to expand my storage, I would just get like bigger ones of these and just put them there and just do that, right, instead of fitting another drive beside the existing one. That also kind of keeps things a bit simpler, right? Just one for OS storage and one for personal, rather than two for personal, one for storage and whatever. So be attentive to that. There are also some of these Dell machines. I actually had 3 of them. I think it was the Optiplex 3040 Micro that doesn't have an M.2 slot, and even if you try to adapt the Wi-Fi slot, you can see it in your operating system, but you cannot use it during boot, just because like the driver itself is lacking from the BIOS, I guess. So it doesn't know how to boot off of M.2 devices. So that was kind of a bummer, because those machines are definitely cheap, and I thought those would be ideal just because of this kind of adaptation of the Wi-Fi slot. But anyway, that was kind of a side note. Right, I linked to Serve the Home in this kind of document here. So they have this Project Tiny Mini Micro series, and that was pretty good when I was looking for these, just because I could look at the reviews that they had on the machines themselves, and I could get a sense of what I am getting into, right, like what to expect from the layout, what I could fit in them, and things of that nature. You might not find reviews for the exact same model that you're purchasing. There are a lot of variations to these. As I mentioned, some might have a single RAM slot, some of them might have 2, some of them might have one M.2 SSD slot, some of them might have 2. Then different other variations, and that's kind of a different model number altogether. But usually they are kind of the same. So you can just use those videos and articles as reference from Serve the Home. Okay, but that's enough talking about the machines. Let's talk about what else you'll need. And let's start off by talking about storage. As I mentioned, you'll need 2 storage devices, right? An SSD of sorts for personal data, and one for OS system data. When choosing these, it's like you're not really interested in things like speed or PCIe generation or anything like that, or I at least am not really interested in that. What I'm looking for most is endurance. The endurance rating on an SSD matters, just because you're kind of limited in the amount of data that can be written to these devices, right? They will eventually fail. The chips within them will just kind of support up to a maximum number of writes, after which they're just not usable anymore. So I went the used enterprise route for picking my own storage. Right, I actually have a Micron 5100 Echo. This is like an enterprise SSD. I managed to get these from a recycling shop. So I guess they got them from the enterprise customer and then they were just selling them on. These had low amount of writes, around 300 terabytes, and I know that's kind of like, that sounds kind of a lot, but when looking at the spec sheet of them, I could see that these have, for the 2 terabyte variant, these can do up to 3200 writes. So that's kind of a big number. Right, there are even crazier numbers, right? Like for 2 terabytes on the Max series, you can do like 17,600 writes, which is just insane. But that's important because, as I said, we kind of constantly write data to these, right? As we upload pictures, as we kind of interact with the system. In the past 3 months of using this system, I had about 10 terabytes written to the personal storage, and that's kind of an average of 3.5 terabytes a month. So with this amount of kind of endurance, right, with the 3200 terabytes that I can write to it, and removing what was already used out of it, I'm thinking they could last me for about 66 years until they're gonna fail and I'll have to replace them, which is an insane number, right? Like I can just buy these and they can just, they can just leave there for the rest of the foreseeable future, right? Like I feel there's going to be a higher chance that I'll have to upgrade these because I'll run out of the 2 terabyte space, rather than they failing on me. So that's kind of an assurance that I really liked, and that's why I went down the used enterprise route. Looking at the options that you have on new, right, for like consumer grade SSDs, I found these 3 relatively cheap ones, right? So these were around 120, 150 Canadian for 2 terabyte drives, which is pretty good, right? That's like a lot of storage for the price. And these are the spec sheets of them. So I was looking at the Patriot Burst Elite, right? This one over here, right? This is a SATA free SSD. And this had an endurance of 800 terabytes. So that's kind of okay. I was looking at this TimeTech SSD as well, I guess, and this for 2 terabytes was listing the endurance at 650, and this was the endurance of a Team Group QX drive, I think. Team Group QX 2 terabyte SSD. This was 400 terabytes of like writes before the drive fails. So basically, the Patriot could last for about 19 years, the TimeTech for 15, and the Team Group for 9. Right, using kind of the same average writes that I've seen so far on my own system. So even the consumer grade ones are kind of okay. You just need to know what you're looking for. I've seen other brands as well that might seem better, right? They might be more reputable and whatnot, but the endurance might even be lower, just because I guess a manufacturer can prioritize different things. So for example, some manufacturers might prioritize speed over endurance, so be careful with that, I guess. And of course, making these less reliable is usually cheaper, and it also gives you an excuse to buy a new one and replace it and kind of contribute to e-waste and stuff. So that's what we're interested in these drives. And that's across the board, right? Like, I'm not talking just about the SATA SSDs, I'm also talking about the M.2s, whichever flavor these come from. So I've been kind of holding up this, which is a pretty small one. These became kind of popular with the Steam Deck and those kind of handheld gaming devices. I think they're used in like Surface laptops, like Microsoft Surface laptops and whatnot. Yeah, I went with these for the OS storage, but you can also go with these, right? Which is basically like still an M.2 drive, I guess, just a bit bigger, right, than the other one. So you can kind of pick either one. Just remember that if you get these, you may need some sort of an adapter, just because even the slot on the machine itself may not have like a screw hole wherever you want to put this in. Let's talk about the personal storage, I guess. So with this, you need to kind of think about how much you're actually gonna need. Before this entire thing, I was on a 2 terabyte subscription of iCloud, and I think I was kind of fine, right? I was kind of using about a terabyte and a bit. I am expecting that, right, it was like a family plan, right? It was 2 terabytes for the entire family, I guess, if I remember correctly. So it was like between myself and my fiance, we had like a terabyte and something, right? So when I chose my SSDs, I basically wanted something to kind of go over that, just to make sure I have space for everything I wanted to run. So that's why I ended up buying these kind of 2 terabyte for 5100 Echo drives, I guess. I got 3 of them just to have a spare. In case they do fail, I want to be able to kind of quickly replace it and then let them rebuild while I search for another one. The biggest concern is that one fails, you don't replace it, you're searching for stuff, and then the other one fails as well. I do have backups, and we'll talk about those later on as well. But still, just having a spare one is, in my opinion, a good idea. It gives you just a bit more, a bit more reassurance that if things go wrong, you can resolve them relatively quickly. And that's kind of it, right? Like, think about what you want to do with this cluster. Think about the amount of data that you might store on it, and just buy according to that. This is also how you could you could potentially start with the kind of Amazon consumer grade drives, just because if you don't really know what you want, then maybe going with those cheaper 2 terabyte drives is easier. Right, you start off with those and then you upgrade to something better once you kind of have an idea of how much storage you're consuming and where you might need to go. You can find these in, like, I think 4 terabyte and even 8 terabyte variants, even more, I guess. But you might not be able to find these enterprise ones used for much longer, just because I think the SATA, the SATA interface is going to basically kind of go away. A lot of the newer drives, like newer enterprise drives, are like U.2 or U.3, I think. And those are basically PCI Express with like a similar interface to this. Right, like the pinout is similar, but they're not going to be... Focus? Yeah, the pinout is going to be similar to this, but they're not going to be compatible with the SATA interfaces that we have in these machines. So just be prepared that if you do want to go the enterprise route, at some point you might need to spend quite a lot of money to do so. Like, I think I was looking at new enterprise grade Samsung SSDs, and 4 terabytes were like $2,000 a pop, like a lot of money. I'm pretty sure you might be able to find them cheaper as well, but if you want quality parts, you might need to be prepared to pay for them. So consumer grade, to start off, more than okay, right? That's good. Get started with that and upgrade as needed. Now, OS storage. So I started off with thinking that 256 gigs of storage is going to be more than enough. And it kind of has been, honestly. Relic think that about 60 gigs is just allocated to the operating system and caches and temporary files and whatever. So 60 gigs from the drive just kind of goes away, right? You don't have access to that. And the rest of it, we use it for like general system storage. And we're storing things like metrics, things like logs, things that are tied with the machines themselves. So nothing personal or nothing that you might want to move across the clusters. So in the beginning, this was fine, right? In the beginning, I was also storing only 30 days worth of metrics. So just 30 days, and I was not like saturating these. But then I decided to store 90 days worth of metrics, just to have a bit more like context into everything. And I kind of started hitting a storage limit with these. So for me, I upgraded to 512 gig drives. So for the new systems that I'm going to be building, I chose these like TimeTech M.2 NVMe drives. And I chose them because they had like the best endurance, I guess, out of everything. So if we look at the table that I put together here, I was basically trying to write like I just bought these, and I was kind of looking over Amazon, seeing my options there, and like looking at which one provides the best endurance for the money. These are kind of what fit around in my budget. I was about I thought I could spend about $70 for each one. I didn't want to go over that. And these were the ones that fit my budget. And if we were to look at, for example, the Crucial P310, this looks a bit weird because I use Dark Reader, and just make everything dark mode. But the 500 gig variant, non-heatsink, M.2 2280. If we look at its specifications, we can see the endurance terabytes written 110 terabytes. So that's quite low. Of course, this is like a Gen 4x4, right? Very high like reads and writes and whatever. Like again, this is for something else, not for what we're trying to do here. The P3 was also within my budget. And this is a PCIe Gen 3, slower, but again with the same endurance rating, so not a lot higher than that. I was looking at this NV3 from Kingston as well. This was also pretty cheap, and in the endurance section for 500 gigs, it lists 160 terabytes. Again, better, but I would have wanted more. I also saw this Patriot one, the P320, and if we look at the product sheet, we have endurance here, and for the 512 gigabit variant is 240 terabytes, so this is definitely better. And then we had a couple team groups, right? This one over here, for example, this was, I think, like one of the best, like with the highest endurance that I found. So 512 gigabit variant is here, right? This one over here, and the terabytes written is 350. So that's quite a lot, right, compared to the rest of them. And then the TimeTech M.2. These are the ones that I went with in the end. These have the same 350 terabytes endurance on the 512 gig variant. These are a bit more expensive than the Team Group ones. I did manage to get a kit of 2. TimeTech does sell these in kits and does provide a bit of a discount when you buy them in kits. So I think the price was more or less the same, but I have bought stuff from TimeTech before and it's been fine. So I was like, okay, let me get the same. But if you'd want to go cheaper, I think the Patriot P320s are definitely the best kind of bang for the buck. Again, not going to be blazing fast. They're not going to break any records in terms of how quickly you can write to these or whatever. But they're going to do their job. They're going to have some decent endurance on them. So you can just kind of rely on them for a bit, right? I think 350 terabytes. If you go back to this, for OS storage, I have like about 1 to 2 terabytes per year. So maybe 7-9 years of using these, and then we'll need to replace them. So still pretty good, but I generally found lower endurance for these just because enterprises, I don't think they've adopted this form factor. Right, in like an enterprise setting, you need the slidey thing so you can just kind of quickly pull it out and then back in. And there are caddies for these, so you can kind of fit them in a caddy and then make it compatible with those, because like the U.2s and the U.3s I think are PCIe as well, right, the same as these ones. But those drives would usually be the ones that are enterprise focused and have a high level of endurance, right? These are consumer grade. Consumer grades are always going to be just a bit crappier, right? Just a bit less reliable than the lower endurance. So don't expect crazy numbers like we've seen on these Micron drives, right? Don't expect like 3200 terabytes, right? Like 3200 terabytes written of endurance. Expect lower values. All right, so last thing to think about is RAM, right? These machines have like these laptop style SODIMM memories, I guess. I was able to get like a pretty big lot of these. I bought, I think, 10 pieces of these Micron 16 gig DDR4 sticks, and I've kind of been using them in most of my builds. I think these are a bit much. So looking at my setup over here and looking at the notes I've put on memory, I think 16 gigs are more than enough. So I was looking at this over, I think this would be 90 days or 30 days or something. And as you can see, the memory usage is pretty low. We're looking at the green part, right? This is basically the actual memory utilization. I do run Postgres databases for the application. I think those eat up a lot of buffer. So before writing to disk, they write to RAM, and then the RAM gets returned to disk. So that's why you see this kind of blue thing almost hitting the maximum. But that doesn't get calculated in the actual used memory. If a process needs additional memory, it can take it from there, and then Postgres just has to write to disk, right? Who cares? Write to disk. I think my overall usage is between 7 and 12 gigs. Even in like a 2-machine setup, it's around there. So these might have been a bit overkill, and I know 16 gig like single sticks of RAM are a bit more expensive than like 8 gigs. Like if you're on a budget, right? If you want to kind of get, as I mentioned, the best bang for the buck, you can go with just 2 DIMMs of 8 gig DDR4 memory. Most of these are DDR4. I was talking earlier about the 3040s, the ones without the M.2 slot and whatever. Those actually use DDR3. So try to kind of stay away from that. I think DDR3 is something that you'll not be able to reuse later down the line. So if you buy like a machine with DDR3 memory and you buy memory for it now, when you want to upgrade, that memory is gone. You're not going to be able to use it on the new machines. Whereas I upgraded to these 10th Gen 7080s, and these still use DDR4 memory. So the 10th Gen i5 still kind of uses that. So I can just reuse my RAM. I don't have to make that additional purchase. If I were to upgrade again, I'll probably need to purchase RAM as well, just because the even newer machines use DDR5. But for the time being, I think with what we're trying to do here, there's not going to be a point to upgrade past this 10th gen machine. I'm going to just keep this with the 32 gigs of memory, and that's fine. It's important to note as well with like single channel and dual channel, I'm not knowledgeable enough to talk about this, but I have heard around that running machines in single channel setup, so just a single DIMM instead of two DIMMs, is kind of bad. It kind of hinders the CPU's performance, bottlenecks it somehow. So if you do go with 16 gigs, try to get two 8 gig DIMMs. If you go with 32 gigs, get two 16 gig DIMMs. That way you populate both channels and it's better. So yeah, do that, I guess. And one other thing, don't just go out buying RAM before you get the machines, right? Check what the machines are coming with first. I bought these 7080s and each one had one stick of 16 gig memory. And that's pretty good because I do plan on running these with 32 gigs of memory. So one of the machines can just reuse the memory that they came with, and then I only need two more, right? So that's going to be kind of a cheaper overall purchase than just buying 4 additional RAM sticks. And that's pretty much it in terms of the actual components that you need to kind of get all of this started. Now, let's talk about some other stuff that you need. And I want to talk a bit about networking. So I am not a networking person, right? Like that's never been something that I enjoy doing. I've had to do it. I've had to deal with it in the past. But if I can just not deal with it, I'm just better off, right? I'm happier. I'll enjoy my life better. Everything is going to be just better not dealing with networking stuff. So for that, I went with a Cloud Gateway Ultra router from Ubiquiti. I think their interface is pretty simple. I don't need to do a lot with it either. Like, you don't have crazy VLANs or whatever. I just have this running my local network, running my Wi-Fi stuff, and then that's about it. I'm kind of calling this out, not necessarily to tell you to go buy Ubiquiti, right? Buy what you can afford and what you want to, I guess. But just pay attention that it has a VPN server built in. As I showed in my previous video, I do use VPN to kind of tunnel back into my home, so I have access to these. I run that through a WireGuard server on my router itself, right? Like I don't have a different VPN service running somewhere in the home and whatever. I think that's prone to failure, right? Your VPN is pretty, let's say, critical, right? Like you want that to be reliable. You want that to be, solid, because, that's kind of your way of accessing these remotely. So if the VPN fails, then that's it, right? You don't have access to them, and you don't even have access to go in and resolve them. So just having that on your network appliance, whatever that may be, I feel is just better. And again, as I mentioned, it doesn't need to be Ubiquiti. I've had like very good experience with Ubiquiti. I've been using them almost since the beginning. I had like their Edge Max router. I had the USG 3P. I ran like the first actual Unify stuff with the nice dashboard and whatever. I think that was the first one. Doesn't matter. But I've had like a good experience with them. They've been very reliable, but I know they're kind of expensive. Right, they're more in that prosumer lineup. But I know Asus, TP-Link, D-Link, Netgear, maybe have like WireGuard VPN server options on routers. Some Asus routers for sure have it. I don't know about the other brands, but I think they have it. I think I heard about that. But again, if you have your router, just go into its settings, upgrade to the latest firmware. You should do that anyway all the time, but just upgrade to the latest firmware and then check to see if you have options to run a VPN server. If you do, great, just keep that, use it, no problem there. If not, you might need to find yourself a router that you can afford that has, support for VPNs. Anyway, the other thing you will need is a switch. Right. I mean, I guess this mostly depends on how many ports you have available on your router, right? Because like a lot of routers have 4 available ports, so maybe that's enough. Right? Maybe all of your devices in your home are Wi-Fi based, and you don't really have anything plugged in. So you can plug in up to 4 devices, and 2 of those could be your machines. Right, that could be a thing. If not, right, if you have like no available ports, just get a cheap switch. I have this Netgear stuff that I bought with points from like Best Buy. I think it was like 20 or 30 bucks or something like that. It's fine as long as it has like a gig. You should be fine. You just plug this to your router and the device is in it, and it's okay. So don't go overboard with your network. I know it's kind of easy nowadays to do that, trying to get everything at 2.5 gig or 10 gig or whatever. But again, just personal storage, right? You're uploading pictures, you're looking at pictures, you're creating notes, you're, stuff like that. That doesn't require a lot of bandwidth. And even if it does, like let's say you're uploading a large video or something from your phone, it's possible your Wi-Fi might be limiting you at that point, right? Like if you don't have Wi-Fi 7, I don't think you can saturate like 1 gig over Wi-Fi. So you have other limiting factors in the equation. That's about it in terms of networking, right? Of course, some cables. I got like a pack of these small patch panel cables, I guess, just to kind of link them between. You can also get like a roll and like a network crimping tool and some network ports, I guess, or whatever that 10-bit is called. That's going to complicate your life a bit, just because you'll need to spend time kind of, crimping it and dealing with all that. So, if you want to do that, it's going to be better in terms of how you're organizing your cables. It's not going to be the same mess that I'm having to deal with. But, you can just not do that and not deal with it and just get some pre-made ones, and it's going to be fine, and just kind of hide them behind and you're going to be okay. Other than that, you will need some USB drives as well. I got the pack of these kind of cheap Philips USB drives, and they're still working. Right, get a pack of these, like 3 or 5. Just get them USB 3 speeds, and you're gonna be fine. We use these to write the installers, right, for the hosts and whatever. We don't use them a lot, right? Like after the initial install of the operating system, we don't really do that often. But it's still good to have some spare USB drives, home, and why not? I also have one that has just Fedora on it. This is like a live ISO for Fedora. When you go to boot from it, you boot into the actual Linux environment. And from there you choose install, and it installs it on the operating system, but you can still use it from there. So I use Fedora to just kind of boot these up, check things like my storage, right? Format my storage, or kind of interact with the machine. Let's say I want to do like a stress test, like a quick stress test to see how it's going. I can just quickly, boot from this, install Sysbench, run a Sysbench test, and then just stop it, and I'm done, right? So that's those are gonna be your USB drives. You should also have some thermal paste. I think I exaggerated with this. I thought I have a lot of machines and I'll need a lot of thermal paste. So I bought like a 20-gram syringe of thermal paste. It was a bit much, right? Just get like the smaller one for 2 machines is gonna be enough. The reason you need this, and I'm gonna put in like CR2032 batteries as well, kind of in the same realm of stuff that you might need. The reason for these two is that even though some of these machines might be listed as refurbished, right, like let's say you buy them from like a e-waste recycler or whatever, they might say, oh, we refurbished these, they're okay, you can use them, whatever. They're probably not. That's how I bought, again, these machines. I bought them refurbished, and they were not, right? They were dusty inside, not too bad, right? Like not the worst I've ever seen, but still, right? That was like so quick and so easy to kind of dust off and clean. Kind of a shame that they didn't do it. And the thermal paste was definitely old. It has never been replaced, I don't think. So that's kind of good to do when you get these machines. You should try to get yourself comfortable with working on them. Right, they're going to run 24/7 for the foreseeable future. So periodically you might need to open them up, clean them up a bit, change the thermal paste. If you're running them in like a dusty environment, you will need to, again, periodically open them up and clean the dust and whatnot. And I think the thermal paste, it would be good to try and replace it every 2 years or so. But you can just keep an eye out on like the CPU temperatures, right? If you see the temperature kind of starting to be higher in a month than it was in the previous month, that's kind of a sign that maybe the CPU thermal paste isn't doing that great of a job anymore, and you would need to replace it. These are just like maintenance stuff. The batteries, right, I mentioned these as well, the CR2032 batteries. These are the BIOS batteries. Usually these never come with like new batteries. They're the original batteries, and after some time they do just not have any more battery in them. And that's going to mean that your BIOS settings are lost, right? You're not going to be able to save the time or whatever, or your boot devices or whatnot. So replacing them when you get them would be good, since you kind of start from a fresh starting point, I guess. And I think other than maybe some dices, right, it's good to have some dices around to kind of measure your luck. I'm quite lucky today, I guess. Right, sometimes you do things, you try to do things right, and it might seem that you're doing things right, and everything is nice, and you checked it 3 times and whatever, and it still doesn't work. Maybe you're just out of luck. So just have some dices around to kind of measure your luck before starting to do anything. I just have these lying on my desk, and whenever I need to do something, I kind of roll it and then see, do I need to pay a lot of attention to what I'm doing, or just pay some attention to what I'm doing? I guess you should always pay attention to what you're doing, but sometimes it's a basic thing that I'm doing, and I can just do it out of reflex. But if I like roll under 6, I'm like, oof, okay, take a step back. Let's review everything that we're doing. Let's that's kind of the point of it. It's just kind of a fun way of explaining the unexpected, I guess. That's definitely all the things that you need in order to get started. And assembling these is pretty straightforward. That's kind of nice with working with these like small enterprise machines. Um, right, actually, you need some more stuff. I forgot to mention this. Have some screwdriver kits, I guess. I basically had this kit from like I think that's Xiaomi, maybe. I don't know. Can this focus? I think that's Xiaomi with Wiha. This is a very good kit, very good cheap kit. I think I've used this for the past 6 years or 7 years. It started kind of going a bit here, so I just kind of taped it up, and it was fine. I recently got myself a new kit. I got this precision screwdriver thing from LTT, and that's just because I was getting some other stuff from the LTT store. Otherwise, I could have just gotten the one from iFixit. Like they're kind of the same. I have like no reason that I got this, right? And I definitely didn't do this for the first week. Right, I was not annoying in meetings with this or anything like that. But get yourself a good screwdriver kit, whatever that might be. It's gonna definitely come in handy. You'll be working on things, so just having it around will make your life easier. I didn't always have good screwdrivers around, and it it was kind of painful, right? Like screws would get I don't even know what the word for that is, but the top bit from them where the screwdriver fits in would just kind of shear off over time, just because the size was improper, or the bit of the screwdriver was just kind of shaved off or something. So just get yourself one. I guess I'm repeating myself at this point. But yeah, you can find some pretty good and cheap ones as well, right? Like the Wiha one, with Xiaomi that I was sharing before. And buy one and don't replace it unless it it that gets destroyed or something. And try to use the correct bit for the screw that you're dealing with. Just because you don't want to kind of strip the screw head. And that's it, right? That's basically the assembly on this. Of course, I replaced it from a paste and whatever previously, but that's kind of all you need to fit your hard drive, right? Like your SATA SSD and your M.2 SSD in it. And you can do the same for the other one. And then we'll be ready to install the operating system. But I think that's it, right? That's kind of all I had to say in terms of choosing hardware. This ended up being quite long. I'm sorry for that, but I feel it's important, right? It's kind of an important step into this, especially since you're getting these and you're possibly using these for the foreseeable future. Like if you actually stick around with what I'm going to show you here and try to do the same, and actually like the tools, like find them useful, and then you can find like a place for them in your life, then you're gonna use it for a while. So it's important to get something right. Don't go very old. Do some research. I think it's important to do some research whenever you're buying anything, right? Regardless of whatever it is, right? Even if it's something new off of Amazon, do a bit of research. right? Yeah, I guess that's about it. And the next one will be starting to install stuff on these, right? Like actually start off with the operating system, and then just kind of continue from there. But for now, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.